WFAE and WFHE, I'm Mike Collins. It is said that dogs are man's best friend. That's actually more than just a saying. If you've ever owned a dog, you know they provide affection and companionship. For others, they are an excuse to exercise. Gotta walk the dog. And for many, dogs give them a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. Dogs also seem to return our care for them, and that is why when a dog passes on, the loss can be deeply felt by its owner. Charlotte writer Jim Mitchum has gone through the hurt of losing a dog twice in recent years, and after each of their passings, he blogged about the loss. He says he received the greatest outpouring of love from people he had ever experienced because of those blog posts, and that led to his collecting other dog owners' stories of loss, the result of which is the book Gone Dogs, Tales of Dogs We've Loved. Jim Mitchum and Laurie Smithwick are the co-editors of this book, and they join us now. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Thank you.
I got to ask, Laurie, because I had no information about you at all. Are you a dog owner?
Not anymore.
You had a dog.
I had a dog.
Dog passed on.
Yes.
And you are a designer by trade, so
Yes.
you, I take, designed the layout of this gorgeous book.
Thank you. Yes, I did.
It's a coffee table book, but it's kind of odd to me that you would want on your coffee table a book that's pretty sad. I mean, it brings tears to your eyes every time you turn the page. Why do I want this on my coffee table? It's gorgeous. Why do I want it?
We've thought about that a lot over the last 5 years, putting this together, and what we try to do is create a celebration, really, of the lives of dogs that we've loved and that touched our lives, and as a tribute. Yeah. So
There are going to be cat owners out there listening to this conversation going, what about cats? What about them?
We've already bought a domain name for that, and that's our next edition.
It's Goodbye Kitty, actually.
Okay.
So.
Do you think that most people understand the grief, the sense of loss that dog owners experience unless they have a pet?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I know from my own personal reference that I didn't grieve as much when my father died as when my dog died.
I've heard that before. Why do you think that is?
Well, I've thought about this, and so one of the reasons I wrote the original post was to understand why I was feeling the way I felt for a week after he died, and it came down to the constant presence of this soul, of this person, of this animal that was in my life every day.
Is it also the lack of baggage? Your relationship with your father, with any other human being, has baggage attached.
Yeah.
Dogs are unconditional. Pets of any kind are unconditional. Is that what it is?
It's definitely that. I think there's also, I haven't been able to find the right word for this, despite many searches in the thesaurus. There's an innocence to dogs and pets in general. They depend on you for everything. And so when something happens to them, there's just a purity to it. You just feel nothing but love for these animals, for dogs, for cats, for any pet that you have. And I think it's just that innocence of them, of their perfection, the perfection of their love.
I mentioned in the very beginning of the program that there was a story in the Washington Post yesterday, which I could not read because I am not a subscriber, and therefore the paywall came up after the first paragraph. But the headline was, "What makes dogs so special and successful? Love." And they said that after searching for dogs' intelligence, a top canine scientist concluded that their true gift is affection. Is that why they make such good companions? They just love you.
Absolutely.
Do they love you, or do they love you because you feed them?
Well, so that was part of that article you didn't get to read, but the scientist in charge of the research concluded that it was beyond the feeding. That there was and he was pretty adamant to say that he never used the L word. So in science they used other words that were measurable, that represented the idea of love. But in the end, he concluded that that's what it is. Yeah. That there is actually affection both ways, and it goes beyond just feeding.
You say somewhere that the only beef you have with God is the lifespan of dogs, because it's so much shorter than a human lifespan. Humans are capable of owning a lot of dogs who pass on, and if you have a dog, it is likely that you will survive it.
Absolutely.
Is it worth the investment to know that this pain is coming?
Yeah. So my dog Skip, Kevin Bacon's character, he's the father of the boy. I thought he was a villain when I first saw it. He wouldn't let the boy have a dog, but what he was doing was trying to protect the son from the inevitable. And sure enough, the dog dies at the end. I hope I didn't spoil that for anybody. But the boy basically lives his whole childhood with this animal. The dog dies on his bed when he's in college. So I believe that, yeah, when you can have the opportunity to invite more love into your life, yes, you just, that's part of the contract. You just know it's coming.
There are several stories about two dogs that I've read about your dogs, Jim. I don't know anything, Laurie, about your loss of your dog. I'm assuming it was a dog. Mm-hmm. Was it a similar experience to Jim's and those stories that are told in this book?
Mm-hmm,
is
definitely.
Your story told in
My
this
story
book?
is told in this book twice, actually, by my mom and then by me. My dog died the summer before I started college, and I was away at camp. And what I write about is how I remember getting the news from my mom that day and realizing what it did was it changed my identity. I was no longer a person with a dog. And that was what hurt the most for me, was that my identity changed.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that's easily remedied.
Of course it is.
But you don't want to remedy it.
Not right away.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think that's the beauty of this book, right? That you have a dog and it's all love. And then the dog dies and it's the most painful thing you ever lived through. And then after that, it's just all love again. You just remember that dog. Stories, happy stories, funny stories, stories about how dumb he was. That never stops. Those stories never go away. And they don't feel sad. Once the passing of the dog happens, you tell those stories.
Happy memories.
They're all happy memories.
You're a writer by trade, Jim, and you've written a lot of blogs about various different topics, but you say that the blogs that you've written about dogs get the most reaction from people.
Yeah, that absolutely. It's just this universal concept that I didn't realize existed until in 2014, after my second dog that my wife and I had together passed. And, it was natural. She had a great life. And but the outpouring again from people that I didn't know, at that moment I realized this is a universal concept, and people feel it deeply.
Let's talk about the stories and the people who contributed the stories in this book, because these people are evidently from all over the world. You don't know most of these people, do you? How did you get them to A, contribute their stories, and B, they're eloquent? Most of them are eloquent. How heavily edited are they?
So
how
everything
much work
was
did
edited.
you do on them?
Every story. We have stories from Jenny Boylan, a New York Times op-ed writer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was edited. So some were more edited than others, and
Right.
and that was one of the challenges of doing a book like this. So we just used basic social media and using our network and our village to get the word out about this thing, and it spread, and we made a tiny little ripple, and that little ripple resulted in 125 stories that came in, 50 of which that we kept, all of which that were edited. And my vision going into it was I'm going to have these great, beautiful stories that are so eloquent. And it dawned on me about halfway through, getting these stories from people, is that this is such a universal concept that not everybody's going to be this great writer. And we needed to include stories that were not as... There's one in here called Ruby from my friend in England who I've met once, and it sounds British. It's beautiful. It's eloquent. And then we have some from people who lived in the country in North Carolina, and the love is the same. That's the beauty of this book. Every story, the love poured into each story is the same.
And there's one out of Alaska, which really struck me, because I read through a lot of these stories yesterday, and I turned the page, and there was the story out of Alaska, and it's told from the dog's point of view until the very end. I don't know how I feel about it. No, seriously, I don't want to say it's breathtaking because it's not, but it was just such an interesting twist on what had come before and what comes after in the book. And then you realize when the owners chime in that they only had this dog for about 4 months, 4.5 months, but they took the dog was old, that he was abandoned in the woods in bear country in Alaska. He shouldn't have survived, but he was nearly blind. They took him in. They left the Christmas tree up till February because he liked the lights. He couldn't see the lights, but he could see the colors, and he liked them. So they left the tree up for him. I think that's just as cool as can be.
Yeah, and I think every dog owner, or it's funny that I say dog owner because owner is such a inappropriate term. I think of it as just commonplace.
Right.
They think they own us, basically. Every person who has a dog has those same idiosyncrasies with their dogs.
The other thing about dogs that dog owners don't realize is that dogs are not dogs. They're not just dogs.
No.
They each have individual personalities, which is what makes them interesting, I think, to people. Your dog, Tucker, was the first dog that you lost, and you write about him very differently from the way you write about your second dog, Sydney, who died as well. And Sydney was the one that inspired this book.
Yes, and we currently have 3 dogs in our pack now, and each one is completely different. And I have one that wants to herd every dog in the world, so I can't take him anywhere. Mm-hmm. And people look at me funny, like, well, why don't you get him trained? And I had a trainer quit on him because his instinct was too strong. But I can't change him. This is the way he is. He's a super happy dog. He loves people and kids, just doesn't like other dogs. So, yeah, every dog has their own personality, and that's the thing about this. When you read through this book, you start to see just how dogs affect that relationship with their humans because of their personalities. So,
we're talking about the book Gone Dogs, Tales of Dogs We've Loved, edited by Jim Mitchum and Laurie Smithwick, who are our guests here. This is a book of dog owners' stories about their lost dogs, the dogs who have passed on. Sad, but you call this book a celebration. Mm-hmm. How so?
Well, because, like I said before, the saddest part is the actual passing of the dog. Before that and after that, it's not sad. You love them when you have them, you miss them when you don't, but you still tell the stories about the dog as though the dog is still there. It doesn't make you sad to tell a funny story about a dog who has died. It's funny, even though the dog has died. And so what we're doing is we're celebrating the relationship we have with dogs. It's emotional. We prefer to use the word emotional instead of sad. And emotional is an okay thing to celebrate.
I mean, love is the most powerful of those emotions, and I think it shines through in the book. And there's one story that's called Dog Disobedience that is hilarious, and I can barely get through it without crying. And because it's just, I visualize my dog in this scenario. So
you mentioned, Laurie, at the very beginning that you've already applied for the cat. What did you call it? The cat what?
It's going to be called Goodbye Kitty.
Okay. Cat owners would say that they have the same relationship with their cats that dog owners do with their dogs, but dog owners, dog people, would say cat people don't get it. I'm sure cat people would say the reverse. But what is the difference about owning a dog and loving a dog versus loving your cat or your pet parakeet or your pet turtle? What's the difference?
Yeah. So there's got to be a level of affection in all of those scenarios with every animal. But dogs, like that article in the Washington Post, they figured it out. They understand how to breach that final barrier and make it okay for them to sit on the couch next to you at night and that's the way it's supposed to be, with their head in your lap. Whereas, different animals just have different kinds of traits.
Yeah, they talk about, because I've read other articles about this, the symbiotic relationship that we have, that dogs have with us, that the dogs, have cultivated over the millennia.
Oh, yeah.
Because they came from wolves. Yep. But they found out that they could help us hunt. and we would feed them from the proceeds of the hunt. So it was a good thing to do, be next to a human being.
That's what they say. That's how that relationship originally started, and it became this symbiotic relationship where we started to depend on each other. In fact, in the beginning, I mentioned that, and that how table scraps are now just part of the deal.
Yeah. So DC writes, these are some of the comments that have come in while we've been talking. DC on Facebook writes, probably the reason why dogs' lives are so short is that they do a lifetime of loving in a comparatively short few years. Shanta on Facebook, we had to put our sweet dog Ava down last month. She had cancer. I was not expecting the level of grief that I felt for her. Even though we went through a lot to keep her alive and it was evident that she would soon pass, I wasn't ready for that type of grief. Kathy emails, Jim and Laurie have truly captured the pure, uncomplicated love we dog owners have for them and the gut-wrenching sadness we feel when they're gone. But they've also captured the hope dog owners have, hope for more pure love from these amazing creatures, even though we know it will only be for a short time. We're so lucky to have the love of a dog. There's a phrase that people say when they think things have gone downhill, that something has gone to the dogs. And after you go through this book, Gone Dogs, Tales of Dogs We've Loved, you come away with the feeling that if the world would just go to the dogs, we'd all be better off.
For sure.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
That's Jim Mitchum and Laurie Smithwick, the editors of Gone Dogs, Tales of Dogs We've Loved. How do they get the book? Quickly.
GoneDogs.com.
Okay. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks.